The wind swept gently through the open fields of Wiltshire, where Eleanor Whitfield stood at the small kitchen window of her modest cottage. Her hands were damp from washing up, and her eyes lingered on the distant hedgerows where the sun dipped low. Life in the countryside wasn't glamorous, but Eleanor found comfort in its quiet rhythm. She glanced at the clock. Nearly 6. Charles would be home any minute. When the front door opened, Eleanor turned with a soft smile. Charles Whitfield strode in, hanging his coat on the hook by the door. He kissed her cheek, distracted, and dropped his satchel by the sofa. "Long day?" Eleanor asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Charles sighed and sank into the worn armchair. "Exhausting. They've added even more pressure at the firm. I'm barely keeping up." He said that often. Each time, Eleanor's heart tightened. She believed him. After all, Charles worked in finance, commuting to London several days a week. That life, he claimed, was draining. And yet, he never asked for anything. He only requested one thing, that Eleanor manage the bills while he saved for their future. "I'm lucky to have you," he said that night, sipping the tea she brought him. "You keep this whole life afloat." Eleanor smiled softly. She had taken on all the household expenses for nearly 3 years. Gas, electricity, groceries, council tax, even his car insurance. She didn't mind. She was a freelance illustrator and earned modestly, but she managed. Charles assured her he was putting away every penny for the home they dreamed of buying. A stone cottage near a bath, with ivy crawling up the walls. Perhaps even a golden retriever. Late that night, Eleanor sketched quietly by the fire while Charles dozed off. Her heart felt full. Yes, things were tight, but Charles was building their future. She had no reason to doubt him. Until the evening she stumbled upon something she wasn't meant to see. Eleanor hadn't meant to go through Charles's satchel. It was a rainy Wednesday. She had been tidying up the lounge when the bag tipped over, spilling its contents. Folders, loose papers, a charger, and, oddly, a sleek receipt printed on glossy cardstock. It caught her eye not just for its pristine condition, but for what it said. Claridge's afternoon tea for two, £110. Her brow furrowed. Claridge's. In Mayfair. Eleanor blinked at the date. Just last week. She recalled that day clearly. Charles had claimed to be working overtime on an urgent project. He hadn't come home until after 10. She stared at the paper a while longer. The receipt didn't name the guest, of course. But Charles hated tea. He once said it made him nauseous. Eleanor folded the receipt and placed it gently back into his bag. Her hands trembled slightly. She tried to tell herself it was a work meeting. Perhaps a client. Perhaps something innocent. But doubt had crept in, and it stayed. The next few weeks, Eleanor became observant. She didn't accuse, didn't question, didn't cry. She simply watched. Charles began dressing more carefully for his commute. He started using cologne he hadn't worn in years. He added a second phone charger to his bag, though he claimed it was for the office. And sometimes, there was perfume on his collar that Eleanor didn't own. Then, one evening, while he showered upstairs, Eleanor opened the banking app on their shared iPad. Charles's savings account was nearly empty. There had been large withdrawals, over £500 here, £900 there, all within the past 6 months. Jewelry stores, luxury restaurants, private car services. The kind of life Eleanor knew nothing about. Certainly not one she was part of. She swallowed the lump in her throat. He had lied. For how long, she didn't know. But her heart was no longer guessing. It knew. That night, Eleanor didn't confront him. Instead, she emailed herself the screenshots. Then, she turned off the light and pretended to sleep. The days that followed felt colder than the Wiltshire winter. Eleanor's mind raced with questions she dared not speak aloud. Charles carried on as usual, returning late, tired, distracted. But Eleanor noticed something else: his phone. It buzzed quietly at odd hours. He would step into the garden or the hallway to answer. His voice was softer, more careful. One evening, Eleanor waited until Charles left the house for his usual late dinner with colleagues. Then she crept to his study. His second phone lay on the desk, screen lit and unlocked. Her fingers trembled as she opened the messages. Names she didn't recognize. Whispered promises. Plans to meet at exclusive London hotels. The evidence piled up in Eleanor's heart. He wasn't just working late anymore. He was living a double life. Despite the pain, she kept her face calm. She knew she needed proof, more than a few messages. Something undeniable. That weekend, Eleanor booked a train ticket to London. She told Charles she needed to visit an art gallery, a rare chance to meet a potential client. She hoped to follow him, to see the truth with her own eyes. The morning Eleanor boarded the train from Wiltshire to London, the sky was a muted grey, the kind that blanketed the English countryside in a quiet melancholy. Her heart was heavy but resolute. The ticket was in her hand, along with a small satchel filled with essentials, nothing extravagant, just what she needed to blend in. She wore a plain coat and a scarf pulled low against the chill. Charles's world in London was a puzzle Eleanor had only glimpsed through overheard conversations and the occasional flicker of his phone screen. Now, she was determined to see it all with her own eyes. The train rumbled south, leaving the green fields behind and speeding towards the vast city. Eleanor watched the blurred cityscape approach, the towering office blocks, the bustle of black cabs, the buzz of life that felt so distant from her quiet Wiltshire village. Arriving at Paddington, she navigated the underground with practiced ease, her pulse quickening with every step. Her plan was simple: find Charles's usual route after work, follow him discreetly, and uncover the truth behind the receipts and whispered calls. Her first clue came from a colleague she overheard on a London bus, a man talking about a Charles who had been spending a lot of late nights around Mayfair. Eleanor's heart sank but her resolve hardened. She followed Charles from his office building, a tall glass tower near the River Thames, through the crowded streets. He seemed unaware of her presence, wrapped in the cold city air, his face grim and focused. He stopped briefly at a sleek cafe, where a woman waited for him. Eleanor's breath caught. The woman wore a silk scarf and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Charles handed her an envelope. Their hands touched just for a moment, but it was enough. Eleanor moved further down the street, feeling the weight of every step. She took out her phone, snapping a quick photo. This was no innocent meeting. That evening, Eleanor found herself at a small pub, nursing a bitter drink and replaying the day's discoveries. The city's glow felt harsher than the countryside's soft twilight. What she saw wasn't just betrayal. It was the life Charles had hidden from her all along, a life she had unknowingly been paying for. The next morning, Eleanor awoke with a restless heart. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the silk scarf, the secret meetings, and the emptied savings account. The pieces of Charles's double life were coming together like a dark puzzle she never wanted to solve. Determined to gather more evidence, Eleanor began searching through public records and online directories. Hours later, she uncovered something unexpected: a lease agreement under Charles's name for a small flat in Kensington. Kensington, an affluent area with a certain refined charm. Not a place Eleanor would have imagined Charles visiting regularly, let alone living secretly. She made her way there by bus, gripping her coat tightly against the spring chill. The flat was tucked in a quiet street, surrounded by tall trees and wrought iron gates. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knew their neighbors but no one spoke much. Eleanor stood across the road, watching the building. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of the woman from the cafe, laughing softly with Charles. Their easy familiarity was a stab in her chest. She noticed the door open, and Charles stepped out, locking it behind him. He glanced around quickly, seemingly unaware of Eleanor's presence. Her mind raced. What was she supposed to do now? Confront him? Leave quietly? Eleanor swallowed her tears and decided to wait. She knew she needed more, undeniable proof to face the truth head-on. In the days that followed, Eleanor returned repeatedly to the flat. Each time, she saw Charles and the woman together, their stolen moments hidden behind closed doors. One evening, after Charles left the flat in a rush, Eleanor slipped inside, heart pounding. The apartment was immaculate, decorated with expensive furnishings, far beyond what their joint income could afford. On the polished glass coffee table lay a jewelry box, half opened. Eleanor's breath hitched as she recognized the logo of a famous London jeweler, a place Charles had claimed he rarely visited. Inside the box, a delicate diamond necklace glittered cruelly under the soft lamp light. Eleanor touched it gently. The weight of betrayal was heavier than she ever imagined. Eleanor returned to Wiltshire feeling both exhausted and restless. The evidence she had gathered was undeniable, yet the weight of what it meant pressed down on her chest like a stone. She knew a confrontation was inevitable, but the thought filled her with dread. For days, she rehearsed the words she might say, the questions she needed answers to. But when Charles finally came home one chilly evening, Eleanor surprised even herself. She waited in the living room, the soft glow of the table lamp casting long shadows. When Charles stepped through the door, his eyes caught hers immediately, an unspoken tension filling the air. "Charles, we need to talk," Eleanor said quietly, steadying her voice. He hesitated, then nodded. "I know," he replied, his voice low and heavy. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I found the apartment in Kensington. I saw the messages, the receipts, the necklace." Charles looked away, guilt and shame flickering in his eyes. "It's not what you think," he said, but the words sounded hollow. "I paid all the bills, Charles," Eleanor continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I trusted you with everything, our home, our savings. And while I was working, supporting us, you were spending money on her." Charles's face hardened. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." Eleanor shook her head, tears brimming. "You broke us. And you broke me." The silence between them was suffocating. Charles took a tentative step closer. "Can we fix this?" Eleanor looked at him, her heart aching but firm. "I don't know if I can." That night, she slept alone in the guest room. The house felt empty, as if the walls themselves mourned the fracture between them. Days passed in a heavy silence. Eleanor found herself drifting through the house like a shadow, each room filled with memories that now felt poisoned by betrayal. Charles kept to himself, offering apologies that sounded rehearsed and hollow. One afternoon, Eleanor received a phone call from her solicitor. The legal proceedings to separate their finances and property were underway. The finality of it all sank in. Eleanor knew the path ahead would be difficult, but a quiet part of her felt relief. The pain of deception was fierce, but the chance to reclaim her life was growing clearer. She began packing her belongings, carefully choosing what to keep and what to leave behind. Among her things, she found a faded photograph of their wedding day, a stark reminder of what once was. That evening, as Charles sat alone in the living room, Eleanor placed the photo on the table between them. "This," she said softly, "was real once. But now, it belongs to the past." Charles looked up, his eyes filled with regret. "I never meant to lose you." Eleanor stood and walked toward the door, keys in hand. "Some things can't be undone." As she stepped outside into the cool night air, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was the end of their chapter, but perhaps the start of something new for her. The days following her departure were filled with a quiet determination. Eleanor rented a modest flat in a nearby town, away from the memories that haunted the Wiltshire house. The fresh start was both daunting and liberating. She found solace in simple routines, morning walks through the village green, afternoons spent at the local library, evenings reading by the window with a cup of tea. Slowly, the pain began to dull, replaced by a cautious hope. One afternoon, Eleanor received a letter from Charles. His words were sincere, expressing regret and a wish for forgiveness. But Eleanor knew some wounds were too deep to heal overnight. She folded the letter carefully, placing it in a drawer marked, "Past." Her future was hers to write now, unbound by betrayal or broken promises. Eleanor's story was no longer defined by Charles's mistakes but by her strength to move forward. With every sunrise over the rolling English hills, she embraced the chance to rebuild, to rediscover herself. And in that quiet courage, she found peace.